To what extent is podcasting therapy for you?
I think 100%.
Yeah.
I think
What eventually attracted you to become a podcast host?
I think that was like the early vlog times. Vaynerchuk, Casey Neistat, of course, like started vlogging, and I think I was like so blown away of this.
I assume the bills didn't go away, though. I mean, you live in Amsterdam. That's even in the farthest part out. It's not cheap. How do you overbridge that part?
If in 3 months or 2 months' time I don't have a new client, then I do have a problem. I need to search for another job.
Yeah.
Take a look behind the scenes. Like it's the same with podcasting as well, right?
Yeah.
Everything that you do, it looks very glamorous from the outside. What they don't see is that you sit in your living room at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday evening and start to edit episodes because your guest canceled and said like, oh, I don't like the episode. I don't want it to get live. Then the passion that keeps you going, or you quit.
So, Marcus, I find it important to start all of my podcasts with the exact same question because I feel like it establishes how the conversation usually is going to continue. And that question is, are you happy?
Definitely. I'm very, very happy. 2 days ago, I got engaged.
Congratulations.
So,
wow.
like, there's not much more happiness, I think, that
Exactly.
you can get out of me. But also in general, I think I'm always happy. That's trying to always stay positive with whatever I do. And I think that's also like pretty much like how I would characterize myself. If someone would ask me like how I would describe myself, then I think like most of the time happy.
Yeah. So what, in your opinion, is required to live a happy life?
Focus on the simple things. I think that's one of the most important. I think one of the most important things that you can do in life. There are so many distractions in our life: social media, phone, and a lot of times we spend way too much time behind the phone, behind the screen, behind something, and we watch things happen from the second row. I've been to the Coldplay concert in Paris, and I think this was again like a really good example of like seeing how people actually experience things. So it's like a really cool concert with a lot of light show, amazing music. But there are people that sit there and just film it and basically watch it through their second screen.
Yeah.
And I think this is that really blows my mind. I've also taken pictures, I've taken videos, but not like for 2 hours because you're never going to look at it again. But it's a complete different experience of like feeling the music, feeling the vibe.
Yeah.
And I do think that people do that also like in general with like life. That is a lot of times they are just spectators to their life rather than actively take a part and making decisions.
Yeah. I actually had the exact same, or have the same feeling. I'm a pretty diehard Martin Garrix fan. Meaning you'll always find me in the front row if I'm at a Martin Garrix concert. But I then get so annoyed by all the people who are indeed then constantly filming. I think I once heard someone say, the only reason why people do that is to prove to other people that they were there. Otherwise, why are you taking these videos the whole time? Because as you say, 90% of the time you're not listening back to it anyway, or watching it back.
Exactly. Like you watch maybe 1 or 2 for social media, but that's about it, right? But like you're not gonna watch the whole. Maybe your favorite song you want to have recorded.
Yeah.
But but I do think it's a good like metaphor basically for life, because those are also probably the people that just watch their life happen and they're maybe sad or miserable, saying like, oh, like everything is happening to me. But rather like taking like part in your life actively. And I think this is what a happy life really does. If you make decisions, if you make active decisions of like, I want to do this or that, or I don't want to do this. I learn how to say no. I value myself. And I think those are really important parts of making life decisions making decisions to a happier life, I think.
Yeah. So you already touched on it a bit briefly, but then what, in your opinion, makes you happy? Your girlfriend, you already stated.
Yeah, exactly. The
fiance, I should say now.
The fiance, of course, I have a dog, which makes me absolutely happy. I think he brought a lot of joy in our life. I think taught us many, many valuable lessons. I think business makes me very happy. Like starting my own company made me very, very happy. Of course, if everyone around us is healthy, is good. If my friends are crushing it, that makes me very happy as well. But I do think, yeah, well, of course, personal health, like those parts are all like part of it. But I think it's kind of like this combination between like having like a strong like family background, together with like, yeah, doing things that you really want to do, starting your own business, like exploring different ideas, maybe founding a couple of companies, finding friends in new cities, in new countries. And I think, yeah, like I'm now here in the Netherlands since almost 10 years, I think, or 7, 8 years. I think that also shows a little bit like that. Yeah, that makes me happy, like meeting new people, going out. So I think that's a happy life.
So you already touched on it a little bit there. I have this guiding hypothesis for this podcast that passion equals purpose, in my opinion. Now, with that being said, how would you describe your passion?
I think I'm passionate about telling stories. I think when I was very small, my mom always used to say that I kind of like build up like pedestals or build something up where I could stand on and say something, right? Or if I would be at the family table at the dinner, I would stand on the bench to like say something. Like I would always announce things. I would always be loud. And I would also always go to our neighbors to tell stories, what happened in our family. My mom didn't like that because the neighborhood was always very informed about everything that was happening in our family. But I think this is really something that is kind of like a red thread through my life. Like I always was so interested in like actually like the people and the stories behind them, and I love to tell it. And like, yeah, back in the days, in the mid-age, like I think I would have been this kind of like storyteller that would move from like city to city to say like, well, have you seen what they do?
Yeah.
And I think the work that I'm doing with the podcast, but also the podcast agency, I think this is exactly, what I'm doing. I'm telling stories from other companies. I'm telling stories myself with my guests. So, and I think that, that's for me like my passion, to tell stories and inspire others to tell stories as well, because I think that's all we have as humans, right? We are thriving on stories. Like everything that we have, we build, we are, is basically built on a certain story, right? Is it based on religion? It's maybe based on your heritage. It's maybe based on, I don't know, hobbies like football or whatever. So it's always kind of like DNA and stories that, shape you as a person, right? And I'm not saying like, because stories sometimes have this negative connotation of like being untrue. Like, oh, he's a storyteller. But I do think, the Bible is also in the end, like it's a lot of stories that have been told and written down what happened a couple of thousand years ago.
Yeah. That's I think, a very nice way to put it then, that you're a storyteller of even other people's stories, I guess.
Yeah.
Are there downsides to chasing this passion?
Well, I think every passion has downsides, for sure. I think, for me, I sometimes get too lost, I think, in stories and work, which is, of course, a downside to like overpace, to not look after your health, to not look after your maybe like your eating habits. And I think especially when you start a business, when you are like starting off, I made a lot of mistakes like the past year that I now look back and like think, wow, this is in so many books. I've read this before over and over again. You should do this, you should do that, you shouldn't do this. But I still did it anyways, because I think it's just a normal form of like founding. It's a normal form of building a company, that you have to make those mistakes yourself to feel it, and then you can move on and learn from it. And I think this is a downside of my passion, is of course like not looking after yourself, because you have to stay very sharp to run a business, to be able to bring food to the table, let's say. And create an existence. I think that was like one of the things that I've not done in a long time, because I was so stressed of, I have to create another deal, I have to find a new client, I have to do this. that you kind of forget those very crucial parts of your life, and then you have low energy. You don't have like a kind of like exhaust where you just push out all the negative energy.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like this upside down spiral, which like you're not. Then you wake up the next day, you're still tired. You don't
and your
eat
business
well.
actually suffers as a result.
Exactly.
Of it.
Yeah. And I think that this is a very big danger that I see a lot of people go through that start businesses. Not particularly like podcast businesses, but I think just in general, that kind of like this, looking after yourself and really focusing on what do I need as a human, like what are the basic human needs. If this is not given, then it kind of like paralyzes you and you're not able to do anything else anymore. And I think that's a very high danger. And that's why, I don't know, 9 out of 10 startups fail.
Yeah. So what are you then doing to deal with that personally at the moment?
I took a business coach. I think this was one of the best decisions that I've made in a very long time. We had now a couple of sessions and it already helps so much to have like a partner in crime that is kind of like on your side, but also not, that looks very critical on things you do. And I think that this is really a part that helped me a lot to focus. And he always says, choose a game and play to win.
Okay.
And I think that this is, this kind of like sports metaphor works very well. I love sports, so like that works also for me very well from a like a motivational standpoint. But I also think that like those kind of like parts, this kind of like structure that you are obviously missing, that this is really important. So like focus, structure, and consistency, I think, are the most important things to kind of like balance that out. Consistency, like to eat healthy, doesn't mean that you always have to eat healthy. You can also eat pizzas and burgers. That's totally fine. To work out not less than every second day. And if you have like those kind of like basics given already, like to write to-do lists in the evening, and I have kind of like this, I'm not sure, it's called like 7-point to-do list or something. So like the 7 most important tasks I'm writing down like basically in the morning. And then the most important task is like number 1, and then I work through them. And then in the evening, I fill up this list with another like 3, 4, 5, like depending on how much I managed. So I always have like the most important tasks like on top again.
What I want to do that
exactly.
day.
And that works for me like very well. And I think that this is like a little bit like the combination, like focus, consistency, and balance.
Yeah. Very nicely said. There are some points in there, but I'll get back to those later. So going back a little bit, obviously you followed study in leisure. Then you ended up working actually in marketing. I think you freelanced a bit in between to then become a podcast host. And now you're even building up your own company as a podcast consultant. It seems like you've already, in relatively short time, had quite a few paths, if we call them that you decided to travel down to. What eventually attracted you to become a podcast host? I mean, you spoke about you enjoy telling stories. At what point did that happen, though, that you're like, okay, I'm gonna do this now?
Yeah, I think that was like the early vlog times, 2015, where like Jon Olsen, I think, Gary Vaynerchuk, Casey Neistat, of course, like started vlogging, and I think I was like so blown away of this kind of like, oh, we also have to create a vlog. How to do it. So together with a couple of other students, we said like, oh, we are also creating our own kind of company and create our cool project. But I realized pretty quickly that like this kind of like following through is really a quality that not a lot of people have. So we started with 3, then one guy, and then it came to like making investments, right? Buying a camera, buying this, buying gear. And then people were like, oh, I talked with my parents and they think it's not a good idea. And then we were like 2. And then at one point when we had to buy it, like I bought it and then like I was alone. So then I did nothing with it. I did a couple of videos. I learned how to edit, and which was afterwards really nice because I think that laid so much groundwork for everything I've done later, that I was a creative guy with marketing experience, but I could also do operational work like edit images on Photoshop and Premiere Pro and edit the videos. And so that helped me a lot. So I'm very thankful about this. Also like a really, really good like tip for everyone who is like a young starter. Learn as many skills as possible. Like learn, I don't know, how to edit a video, like with YouTube videos. There are so many nice videos out there. Learn how to edit a picture, all those kind of like skills help you so much later in the working life to make it and to be like a added value.
Sorry to interrupt. Were there any of those essential skills that you actually learned in school, or was everything on your own?
No, that was I think everything. Yeah. No, because in leisure, like of course, like basic marketing skills, like you learn in your study, but I'm generally not such a big fan of like the academic like way.
Structure,
like I was always more like an operational like focused guy. That I have like a very bad habit of not like listening too much to what someone says. So if someone says, "Oh, the door is closed," I'm the guy who has to like check myself, like, oh, maybe I can open it, right? And I think that very much shows already like my characteristics a little bit. So I'm, for example, I went to the Netherlands because I was sure that in Germany I would have never be able to finish a study, because if there would be one person telling like, okay, this is it, basically, like I'm gonna give you a lecture of 2 hours, you have to study it and you have an exam on that doesn't work. And I think in the Netherlands with problem-based learnings, with group work, with all those kind of like elements that they have in the educational system, it works much better in terms of like exploring your perfect answer rather than getting the perfect answer served. And then we had this name 301 that was always kind of this project name, like 301 like videos, and that was a company name.
Yep.
And then I did a couple of interviews in video format, 3 minutes and 1 second. So that's why it's called 301 Studios. And then later in the pandemic, I've got really like a big passion for listening to podcasts. So I was commuting quite a lot. I was traveling quite a lot in my jobs. And every time when I was on a train, on the plane, or anywhere else, I always listened to podcasts. So, and I love this medium so much that you can basically consume passively. Like you don't have to interact with anything, but you can consume so much like value, and you can like withdraw so much value out of every single podcast that you listen to. And then at one point I was like, oh, maybe I should start a podcast. And I had this idea for a very long time, and I started way too late. So also really another learning, like just get started, right? So a lot of like times like ideas without execution is worth nothing, right? And I have so many ideas that I want to do and so many things that I want to do even now. But now I have to like focus on building an agency and building the podcast agency, and all the nice, cool, crazy podcasts with influencers and whatever like you can do at one point when you have made it already, right?
Yeah.
And I think that this is really something that that I learned, I think, over the years, that you always like need to kind of like focus down or focus and then get started. So yeah, that was a little bit like the way of getting into podcasting.
So getting all these podcast guests, it's quite a time-consuming job. Obviously, you have to like research the guests. You have to see who fits what I'm trying to tell. Then you have to reach out. Then you have to hope they respond. Then that is like before, and then you actually go there, you film or online, whatever it is. Either way, you still have to record, prepare the interviews, and post, edit, and eventually launch. It's very time consuming.
Yes, sir.
How do you manage to stay motivated to keep putting out content? Like what's keeping you going there?
I think I think there were like some stories where I launched a podcast from a guest, and I get a message from him later, and he says, because of your podcast, I reconnected with my father again.
Wow.
Because my father never understood what I did actually.
Yeah.
And now he does, because you ask questions, and he never really like ask himself like, oh, what is he doing? But then he kind of understood like his son better. And I think like those are the messages that you want to get. And I think those are the things why you do it, because of like helping people. Or if you meet someone and someone says like, oh, I listened to your podcast, and you think like, how is that even possible? Yeah, because like this friend and I think that's why you do it. Like kind of like my goal was always like, if I can help one person, then it already paid off, right?
Yeah.
And along the way, the more listeners you get 500, you get 1,000 listeners, you get 5,000, you get 10,000 listeners. Along the way, you forget that, right?
Yeah.
And then you kind of like just start chasing the numbers. You start chasing, I only get 100 likes on this picture. Why no one listens to that podcast? I only got 300 downloads. But then if you actually think about it, that 300 people listen to 45 minutes of content, it's mind-blowing, right?
Yeah.
If you would see 300 people in front of you, every single week, because this is what a podcast is doing, you put out content every single week, it would be amazing. And every marketeer would actually be very happy about it, because if you look at other content formats that are out there, like TikTok with 15 seconds, 7 seconds attention span, with YouTube that have 50-60% like watch through rate, websites that are like 2-3 minutes of duration that people are on your website. 45 minutes is like a crazy long period that people consume your content. And I think like this is what really keeps me going on, like kind of like meeting those inspirational people, finding it out. And even, for example, when I had my own podcast, I every guest that I had, I got super inspired. I went home and I was like, wow, I'm going to edit this immediately.
Exactly.
I fell in bed like 1-2 o'clock in the night because I was super tired, but I had this urge of like, I really need to listen back. I want to like experience this again. And then it's like very fresh, everything. You remember everything, like you know exactly where to do the cuts. But also with the podcast business, it's the same, right? Like you now work together with clients, they invite guests, and those guests also tell stories, and it's absolutely amazing what they tell you. So even that's maybe not your industry or not your field of expertise, but you sit in with listening to, I don't know, serial entrepreneurs, to CEOs, to whatever, like kind of people. Like this is basically a live podcast that I've done like for free years ago.
Exactly.
And now I'm getting paid sitting there having like a live podcast, creating this insane network of CEOs and business owners and creatives while doing this and while getting paid. So like, I mean, I think it's obvious
Ideal,
like why I'm still motivated. Right? Yeah.
You actually basically already answered at least my next question, because I have written down here, do the stats ever get in the way?
100%. It's always like this, right? So when you start, you are thankful about every second, like every single download you get.
Exactly.
And once this kind of like threshold like passes, and you get a certain amount of downloads, you get 50, you get 100, you get 200, and then you kind of like expect like 200 to be the standard, or 300 to be the standard, or 500 to be the standard. And at one point, like you get sad when it's only 350. But then again, like, you know, so, and I think, again, this is, I think, like this human like behavior of always like wanting to experience things like in this kind of like second row. And I think that's the same thing, rather than saying like, well, I did an amazing job of a podcast, 300 people listen to it, or 50. Let's go back to the beginning where I wanted to help one single person. So if one single person listened to it, then it's absolutely amazing. And you never know who listens. I think that's also the beauty, right? There was one podcaster, a YouTuber, and he, I forgot his name, and he started YouTubing basically, and then he had like 17 views or something like this, and one of them was Peter McKinnon. So basically, this guy reached out to him and said like, wow, you have an amazing YouTube channel, should we do a video together? And then afterwards he blew up because he was like hanging out with Peter McKinnon and everything. So you also never know who is watching like and who is consuming your content. So even if it's like one person or two people, that might be like your next client, or that might be like someone that wants to work with you. So you know, like that keeps you going on, like keeps on like keeps you creating, and keeps you like also mentally like fresh, I think, to do things.
Very nice. Or the reason why I ended up starting this podcast is actually as a certain form of therapy, in the sense of I finally finished my master, and it was probably the biggest anticlimax I had ever, because I get my diploma, and now more than ever do I have no idea what I actually want to do with my life. Yeah. And upon questioning this among my friends, and eventually actually focus groups as well, I realized I'm not the only one. Right. So what I then thought, hey, why don't I just go talk to people who at least are very passionate about one specific thing? And to a certain extent, that makes this podcast kind of my therapy. To what extent is podcasting therapy for you?
I think 100%. Yeah. I think I can really relate also with this loneliness and confusion that you get after you get your academic degree, because even though that it kind of liberates you, it also narrows you down quite a lot. And for me, like I had this kind of liberation, so now I can do whatever I want. Yeah. And it was amazing. So on the one hand, I was thinking like, oh, I can work in marketing, I can work in, I don't know, as an account manager, I can work in like, I don't know, finance. Like in the end, like you can work in a lot of different companies. I can work for a tech company, I can go into crypto, I can go everywhere. I want to go into sports. Yeah. but then again, like
It's overwhelming.
exactly.
Yeah.
And then you start maybe a job, and then like my dream was always to become a sports manager and like be in the big clubs and become the president and blah blah.
Yeah.
But then I started to work in sports, and even though that I loved it, but like the more you take a look behind the scenes, the more I realized I don't enjoy the sports as much as I did before. Because when there's like a game in the stadium, but you're like down in the office, and then you are like, okay, let's me finish this email, and then let's see about the kickoff. And then I had this like feeling of going out like after the kickoff, so then you missed the choreography, like all those kind of things. And it felt a little bit unnatural at one point, and it felt a little bit like, wow, I'm losing my passion here, right?
Yeah.
So then I thought, okay, it's nice, like time for like a next step. So I moved on, and then I went to like a startup that ultimately failed. Then I moved on to the car industry, which was like a car startup, and experienced this kind of like, it was a startup, but in the end, I think it was still very corporate.
Okay. Yeah.
And then I realized like this is so I don't want to work in sports. I don't want to work in a corporate. Like, what am I doing? And I think if you're constantly saying like, oh, you could do this better, you could do that better, you could improve this, you could improve this, then at one point you also have to prove it that you can do it, right? Yeah. And that's, I think, when I like decided to start like my own business.
Right.
So I can very much like relate to this kind of like like confusion and like feeling of like overwhelming feeling of I can do everything.
Yeah.
I think one way is to really explore what you want to do, explore as much as possible, but also try to focus. And I think focus is really something that our generation really lacks, because we have all the opportunities. We can now even like it even got more. It got added like, oh, now it's remote working.
Yeah.
I can work from home. Now I can work from everywhere.
More
I don't even have to be like so. It gets even more difficult, because like what speaks against a life in Bali, working for, I don't know, like a finance company or like whatever. And you just work from Bali as a like freelance or something.
Yeah.
Like nothing speaks against that, right? There are many downsides to this as well.
Of course.
But it seems just so tempting. So like, why should I live in Amsterdam or in Berlin or in London and pay a lot of money for my rent and go to the office every day? Like, am I stupid? Or, and I think this all adds to this kind of like general concept of a very confused generation that doesn't really know where to move and what to do. And I think focus really, really helps there a lot.
There were twice now points I want to ask about. On the one hand, the football, right? You go into football because you think you have a passion for that, and then realize it's not quite what you expected, basically. And equally for this topic of where do I want to live, and I have the opportunity, thanks to remote work, now to work from anywhere. Why would I stay in Amsterdam? To what extent do the societal pressures, and I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but the part about football, I realized that a lot of people, they also follow football because their friends follow football or their parents are in it, that sort of stuff. Has that part ever played a role in it also, with you then deciding to stay in Amsterdam? Do you feel as if that part is actually part of who you are, or is it just, oh, I've grown into this person? Know what I mean?
Yeah, like the nature versus nurture, a little bit.
Kind of, yeah.
I think, of course, like my father was like a huge football fan. I started playing football when I was 4 or something. So, like, obviously, I think this like I'm
not saying it's a downside.
No,
by the
like
way, but just
not at all. But I'm just thinking like right now, if it's like I think I'm very passionate about football, right? I think I played football until I was 22 or 23. And basically, if you always play, I also played, I think, quite good leagues in Germany, like nothing professional. Of course, that was always the dream. And then of course you have like training 3 times a week, you have the games, and if you do that over, I don't know, 20 years or 19 years, then you definitely then you definitely have a passion for something, right? If you never like ask yourself like, oh, can you spend a Sunday or differently than on like the football field? And then, of course, when I went to the Netherlands, like it changed a little bit and like studying and like starting
Yeah.
to work. But I always wanted to work in sports. Like this was always like my dream. And I still could see me ending up there at one point, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think, you just lose your, sometimes, it's with everything. I think if you like take a look behind the scenes, like it's the same with podcasting as well, right?
Yeah.
Everything that you do, it looks very glamorous from the outside. Like, oh, he has everything that I wanted. Like he has a podcast, he has this. And then when you actually do this, like you said it yourself before, you said it's a lot of work, it's a lot of, and then of course what they don't see is that you sit in your living room at 12 o'clock on a Tuesday evening and start to edit episodes because your guest canceled and said like, oh, I don't like the episode, I don't want it to get live.
Yeah.
So you have to like, I don't know, maybe record another podcast very on short notice with someone, you're not prepared. It's 1 o'clock in the night and then you go to sleep and you have to get up and maybe do your normal job or do whatever.
Yeah.
But this is like this unglamorous side that you don't see. So I think every single time when you look behind the curtains, you realize it's not as glamorous, it's not as nice as it actually like seems. And it's then the passion that keeps you going, or you quit.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
those are the two options.
Yeah. I agree. I'm going to skip ahead to a question I actually had planned at the end, but again, you touched on it a few times already. So obviously the podcast is called The Quarter Life Crisis. Did you have a quarter life crisis?
I think so, yeah. There was I started to work in a startup where I think things were not as legit as it seemed like in the beginning.
Yeah.
And I think that there I learned a lot about like looking into your contracts, making sure you have a contract, making sure you get paid on time. Because a lot of times I think you kind of like accept things just because you want to move quickly and you want to move fast. And I'm someone that gets very much influenced by success.
Yeah.
Or I maybe used to be someone.
Getting better.
Yeah. So when someone was saying like, wow, I have this amazing, and that happens a lot in business life. I have this amazing chance. And if you do this and this and this, then you can earn that much. Or if you join my course, then within 3 weeks, I can create 10,000 euro income for you every month. And I think I'm very open for those kind of offers, like this fast success and everything. And I think that kind of was something that led me into a situation where I should not be like working with people that actually build me down, tell me like, you're not creative, you're not, you should be an account manager, you're never a business owner.
The money's not there.
Exactly.
It's in sales.
And if you get told the same kind of phrase over and over again, you're not creative, you're not this, you start to believe it. You start to believe it even yourself. Yeah. Like maybe I am not that creative. Maybe I am not like this smart that I maybe thought. Well, not that I did, but
yeah.
And I think that this is really something that like led me a little bit into this quarter life crisis. So then I kind of like started to take like a job in like a car startup basically, and kind of lived a little bit more like this corporate life, right? Yeah. While I always had this passion to get started. Yeah. And like 1.5 years passed and I postponed my podcast over and over again. Oh, I'm going live. Like I have to record more. And then I'm going live there. Oh, I still have to think about the equipment. Then I still need to think. So there were always like parts that...
Excuses, yeah.
Exactly. And at one point I said like, no, let's go live on 1st of April.
Yeah.
And then everything pointed to this direction. And then even though that I maybe was not ready, at one point I just went live with it and just went with it.
Exactly.
And it was the best decision that I've ever made.
Yeah.
And I think that those uncomfortable like decisions that makes you sleepless nights, that makes you like really think about life differently, I think those are exactly the decisions that actually accelerate your life and actually make change in your life. And all those small decisions, those small maybe I'm gonna, I don't know, wake up 10 minutes earlier or something like this will not matter. Like the more uncomfortable the decision, the better the outcome. Yeah. And I think that this really kind of like put me into like into kind of like a quarter life crisis where I was like really searching myself and really maybe still like I'm still a little bit searching myself. I think that's also part of it.
Yeah.
But I could really realize, for example, when I was starting my business, because I started kind of like registering a business, and then I had already like one client that I helped producing a podcast. Because naturally, if you have a podcast, people ask you like, hey, can you help me here? Can you help me here? And then all of a sudden your agenda is full of like helping people, right? Then you think, oh, maybe I should monetize it. Then you start reaching out, say like, hey, maybe you should, maybe I should also charge you something. And all of a sudden no one needed help anymore, right? So for free, help is always welcome. If you have to monetize it, then it's difficult. Yeah. But I also didn't really have an official business, right?
Right.
And then I started to register a business, but I had 0 clients. So then I was like searching for like clients. And there was one person, it was actually a billionaire, that I had a really, really cool talk with about a podcast concept, about everything. And then he said to me like, but how does it look like? You have a full-time job, I saw on your LinkedIn profile, and you have this business. So how are you going to do this? And I said like, so if you sign, then I will quit, kind of. And then he said to me like, okay, let me give you like one business advice. I like your idea. I like everything that you've done. And I would naturally want to go in business with you. But because this if-when scenario doesn't exist in business.
Yeah.
So either you commit or you don't.
Yeah.
And I think that this was really like such a valuable lesson and like such a wake-up call for me, that I thought like, okay, like this is how it works. And I think I had the same kind of experience over and over with many clients, that they were like, okay, but if this guy still works in a company, like, can he then deliver? And even though if I could have, they just didn't do it. And then the moment I quit, and the moment I like full time went for it and said like, I have my business now, I'm going to do it. That was the moment that like clients started to come in and say like, oh, wow, you have a cool business now. Yeah. So it's also like a little bit as kind of like business owners, like a small community, that you always try to help others, right? That they start something and they know exactly how you feel. Yeah. So then they maybe give you like a small deal and say like, okay, come, like you can do a small podcast for me. And I think that this was really something that helped me a lot, like to go get over this like personal crisis of thinking, oh, maybe I'm not creative, maybe I'm not this, maybe I'm not this. But still then, or maybe still now, but it's really changing now, I was still doing things like everyone else. I was always saying, like when I was working for like corporates or working for other companies, like, oh, you have to do this different. Or you like always the same like boring things, always the same reach out on LinkedIn, like, hey, they want to do business with me. But I was doing the exact same thing, right? Yeah, yeah. So like what changed? Like it's all about self-confidence. It's all about like, okay, do I want to go the extra mile, or do I want to like play with all the other like fish in the sea? And I think that this is like a little bit kind of like the mindset, I think, that shifted in the past couple of months to really like stand out, to really do things not the usual way, to send video messages to clients, to make mock-up podcasts and send it to them, to have, I don't know, to send them, to put like a banner in their office and say like, well, this should be your podcast ad, things like that, right? Yeah. And that makes it exciting, because then people can actually like experience it and feel it like, okay, so we want to work with this young guy that brings in like something new, and not otherwise I can just work together with my marketing agency, because they can also press record on an audio recording, because it's nothing else, right? Yeah. But I think what separates you from other people is like the creativity, your personal energy, and like your kind of like new inspiration that you can bring into like a company.
So you eventually make that step to say, okay, you know what, I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to try. I assume the bills didn't go away, though. I mean, you live in Amsterdam. That's even in the farthest part out. It's not cheap. How do you overbridge that part? How do you say, where does the money come from, for example? Because I know, I agree. At some point, you just have to say, commit, do it already. But bills still got to be paid. And I think that's what stops a lot of people from either committing or following their passion, is like, but I gotta put food on the table. Where is it coming from? Or was it already at a state that you could say, I quit?
It was a little bit like on the edge. Like I did have like a couple of months of savings and everything that and I like the week I quit, like 1 week before I started like my new company, I signed my first client. So I already had like this kind of like new client plus some savings. So I kind of was safe. Yeah. But I'm not sure if that was like the best approach, to be honest, because
it's just what worked for you.
Yeah, well, I also think it was a little bit maybe like a negative point because I was so successful in the beginning. I thought that it's gonna be like this kind of like self-running business, like
Yeah.
oh easy, like wow, I didn't even start, like
Yeah.
and I kind of like also got a little bit maybe like arrogant or a little bit cocky even,
Yeah.
to say like wow, this is easy,
Yeah.
like running a business. But then like I put all my baskets basically into like running an operational business and like putting a lot of like effort into recordings and content creation, all those kind of things, and I was running it on my own. But then I was realizing like, okay, like maybe I should outsource some parts. Maybe I should, because if you have a business, like it's not always the best if you spend 6 or 10 hours like editing an episode. Maybe it's better to outsource this and you search for new clients. And I think that this was a really big mistake that I did in the beginning,
Right.
that I was really focusing on like all the operational work, because you can always hide behind operational work. Like I'm doing this because that needs to be done, right?
Yeah.
But you don't work like on strategy, you don't work on new clients, new business development, and those kind of things, which are much, much more important, of course, for yourself and for the business, or the success of the business.
Yeah.
And then I think that was then like the next stage of like the company, that I had like a client, everything was perfect, but then I didn't really search for other clients anymore. So all of a sudden it was like, wow, the money is like getting less and less and less and less. And then you kind of like start to get very nervous, and you get kind of like then again this upside down spiral. You stop working out, you stop eating healthy, you only focus on client work, but you're also very uninspiring because you write the same LinkedIn message to hundreds of whatever, like content marketing managers, CMOs in the Netherlands in their businesses. So where's the innovation? Where's the creativity? Where's like this? I think that financial pressure is definitely one of the most threatful pressures that you can have, for sure, in a business, because it paralyzes you. Literally, like you cannot think straight, because you only care or wonder, how am I gonna pay the next bill? It was not this bad that like it was, like I don't know, that I was almost on the street or something. But I could feel this kind of like pressure building up of like saying like, if in 3 months or 2 months time I don't have a new client, then I do have a problem. I need to search for another job. And I think that this is something like really valuable, So,
but I do feel like, or at least from the way you tell it, it relates back to what you said earlier, that at some point you have to reach these deep points, because it forces you to come up with a solution, because the only other option is quitting, giving up.
Exactly.
And that wasn't an option.
Yeah, so exactly.
It forces you into this corner, I guess, and then it's trying to come up with creative ideas. Okay, how am I going to get these other guys? And clearly you indicate that the way to do that is be creative about marketing, and don't send them another LinkedIn message that they get from everyone, but come up with something
stand out
new.
Because like when I'm engaged in a message, then most of the time it's not a message. It's like, hey, I just wanted to check in. Okay, like why? I don't know you. Like,
thanks.
But the funny thing is that like when you receive it, you're kind of annoyed, but like you were doing the same thing. And it's the same with many companies, with many marketing campaigns. They always talk about the other companies like, oh, this is not creative, but what are they doing? Like, are they doing something different? Okay, maybe your ads have some different visuals. They look maybe the same, but are you really standing out?
So you already touched on it a few times, that focus is essential, right? And I think that was then also what led me to starting the podcast. In a world where you have literally so many choices, how do you decide what path is eventually right? Do you have any advice there on finding the focus? I mean, the focus is one thing, but how do you determine what to focus on?
I think one good part to start a company is always like to think how I would leave the company.
Okay.
So what could be, for example, what could I sell, right? Because a lot of people, I think, they start companies and they don't really have it's very dependent on their network or their expertise or their whatever. So basically you have to do this for the rest of your life. You have to do this company, or you have to do this business or this service that you're providing. And if you want to build like a profitable business, I think you should always focus of like, what could be a potential value that I could, for example, sell. In my case, if I have like a podcast company and I have 15 clients, they work together with me, everything is nice and fun. But if I'm not there, what happens with the company?
Exactly.
And I think that this is something that you have to that helps really to find focus. So like also looking a little bit in an unromantic way on like what is profitable. Um, and I think that this is a lot of times people are too much like driven by ideas. Like in co-working spaces, like every week, basically you talk with someone who has an amazing idea that has never been done before, right? And that has to do with focus. Like you can jump on it and say like, oh, wow, I like this idea. Maybe I should help him. Maybe I should contribute. Or you focus on your own and you say like, I'm really focusing on the things that are first and foremost profitable. And if I then have more time, then I can do cool things. Because I'm very sure I could do very cool podcast concepts with influencers, creators, with whatever. But they also have a business to run, right? So the budget that they have for like marketing or for anything else is very little.
Yeah.
So they could pay me not enough for me to be successful. And of course, maybe it helps you eventually to grow your business, because then they would say like, oh, he's also doing this cool podcast with this creator.
Yeah.
But most of the time, those are the clients that you're not very like paid very well.
Yeah.
So you have to like find clients that like pay you the actual amount that you also like put into like your working time. And I think that helps you already like to cross out a lot of like paths.
Yeah.
So whenever like I also like the first meetings that I had with my business coach, he said like, okay, all the things that you're doing, basically you're telling me you have 4 different businesses.
Yeah.
Choose one.
Yeah.
And then choose
focus.
your game
Yeah.
and play to win. And I think that this is really something that helps you a lot to really decide of like what kind of path to choose, like to maybe like, of course, chase a little bit the money, but choose really the path that is like profitable. And of course, it doesn't apply to any idea, right? But I think if you start a business, you should also do it for like earning money, right?
Yeah.
And then you take away a little bit the romantic aspect of like a business, that it has to be passion and this are all cool and fun and games. But I think in the end, you have to live from it, right? And if not, then probably you should start a non-profit, which is then a complete different thing on itself, right?
Yeah. Okay. Upon checking your LinkedIn, you mentioned that you are now a podcast consultant. Now, podcasting probably has been around for a while, but it's only really gotten popular, at least in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, in like the past 5-6 years, something like that. Why did you end up choosing to consult others rather than solely focus on your own podcast?
I think I think about the profitability. I think there's currently like such a big market share that can be gained in the podcast market. There's very little knowledge like on the company side about podcasting. But what I think the like future potential of podcasting is like reached maybe like 20-30% currently.
Yeah.
So if you look, I said it before already, like if you look at like the attention span of the people, it goes down and down and down and down. And I think that this whole mental well-being, like being on your phone, like digital well-being, I think is a common term that's used there, is becoming more and more important, which means that people will spend less time on their phone. They will maybe cancel social media apps, or you will maybe limit your time on social media for 1 hour. The apps that get smarter and smarter, so you cannot just say like, oh, remind me in 15 minutes or give me 1 more minute or ignore the limit, because that's very easy. Like you can click it away, but actually like it's locked. So it's done for today. You decided this, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like so
you made bad choices already. Okay.
Exactly. But I think that at one point this will become like a very important part. And I think the generations to come, they get much more aware of this, like kind of like spending your time as it should be and spending your time together. So brands in future have to like find touch points with their future clients where they are not intruding. Yeah. And I think podcasting is like one of the best tools to do it, because if you look at the podcast, how it is used now and where people consume podcasts, it is most of the time in the times where they're actually like off the phone and on their own, while they go for a walk, while they clean, while they drive the car, while they commute. So it's actually not the time where they actively saying like, oh, I want to see something on my screen, but it's actually the time where they are on their own with themselves, trying to get value out of something. Yeah. And then if a brand steps into a podcast and then can add value to your life, then I think you win in
the sweet spot.
Exactly. And then I think this is a very powerful tool basically to convey your brand message, and however you are doing this. I think that this is really like a future development that we will see like much more. Yeah. But I think that you have to start now, because you have to start building a relationship.
exactly,
You have to experiment, because also like in the beginnings of Google and Facebook, it was also all an experiment, right? People were just saying, oh, let's bid on this keyword, let's just bid on this keyword, let's do that, let's put this ad campaign out. But then now they realize, wow, we wasted a lot of money because the keywords were maybe too like broad, and
exactly,
you know. And I think that's the same with podcasting as well, that they have to now like start building a relationship, but then realizing later, oh, maybe this was too broad, maybe we have to narrow it down, maybe we have to focus only on our target group. And that's why I chose also to be a podcast consultant, because I think there's like a huge market gap that is
an opportunity
open now, and will be much bigger in the future.
That makes sense. In that role, though, as consultant, obviously you're giving advice to quite a lot of established companies. Some guys working probably with like 20, 30 years of experience in marketing or whatever it might be. Does imposter syndrome ever get in the way there? Do you ever like...
Always.
Yeah?
Yeah. Always.
How do you deal with that?
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but it's really like, it's always like, I always have this feeling like it's that you say something, you think like, okay, like, is it 100% true? Like, but I think everyone has this. And I think once you accept that, I heard a really nice saying, which is called, you always have to remember that the other people are also living for the first time.
Yeah.
And I think that describes very well that like this imposter syndrome, like everyone has this feeling. Everyone has this feeling of, oh, maybe I'm at the wrong spot, or maybe I'm not 100% convinced. But I think if you look at Richard Branson, or if people like this, they also say like, just accept the job and like learn it on the way. And that's basically what I did in the beginning. Now it's much more established, of course. So now like you do know what you talk about, but the beginnings I was telling a lot of things that I had no idea if that was actually true, right? If you had someone in the room who was a little bit experienced with podcasts, but I read, then, you know, like you got into kind of like awkward situations.
Yeah.
But that's nice, because you learn then basically on the job how to also like fake it, and maybe also experience a little bit, okay, who's in the room who knows thing about podcasting, you know? So, but yeah, I think imposter syndrome, for me, like it's always there. Like I always wonder, like at one point someone will expose me or something.
So you also don't feel like that has necessarily decreased now that you've been doing it for a bit longer.
No, I think you just tend to ignore it because you know this feeling is there.
Exactly.
And I think
because I do believe that's also one of the many things that stops people, you know, again, from chasing this passion or whatever it is, because they believe, who am I to talk about this topic for whatever reason. So. I'm trying to figure out, obviously, how do you navigate that? How do you like just say, you know what, I might not, but who else is gonna do it? You know, so
I think it's like to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. I think that's basically the only
summary of
the only way to do it. And like I found out. Very recently that I always thought I have like there are like those two kind of mindsets. There's like a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, and I always thought I have this growth mindset and that I like the creative guy. But then when I read about the fixed mindset, then I was like thinking, wow, actually a lot of like my characteristics are as a fixed mindset, which means I'm not super hyped to always put myself out there. I'm not super hyped to put myself into uncomfortable situations, but rather like cancel events or say like, well, it's not so important to network or to go out or whatever, you know. And I think that this really changed. So when I get now opportunities, most of the time I score the kind of importance of the event. And if you score in general, it's a very good rule that you skip the number 7. So you cannot give a 7. So for example, if there's an event, I say like, how important is this event for my business, without giving a 7, right? So it's either like an 8 or it's in 6. And if it's in 6, it's like, maybe not so important.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if I should go. But if it's an 8, I have to go. And then there's also no fixed mindset that can tell me like, oh, maybe you shouldn't go, or you have like a birthday to attend or something else, or you have to walk your dog because there's always something that you can do instead, right? Or I have to edit a podcast. But I think, sometimes it's just like forcing yourself into those situations, and then you will always have such a reward from it. Like, but of course it helps. Like, I mean, I interviewed now like 100 people. I recorded well over 200, 250 episodes. Like it helps, of course, like with talking, it helps like when you get into the situation of like talking to people, like having small talk and all those kind of things. It helps massively if you've done it many, many times, right?
Yeah.
And you just get better at it.
Yeah.
You get better at faking. That's it.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That makes sense. So is there any piece of like insight that you received from all of your guests that you have interviewed by now that really stuck with you the most?
Stuck with me the most. That's a good question. I think one was definitely like consistency is key. I think probably it's going to be like a top 3 because it's
also interviewed a lot of
yeah,
guests.
exactly. Yeah, so I
That's
think
understandable.
I think consistency is key. I think this was like the common theme with all the people that I interviewed. Like, and it was artists and magicians and business owners and whatever, creators. And all of them said basically like the more repetitive I've done something, I got better at it, like the rule of 10,000 hours and so on and so on. So like the more you do things, the better you get. And the more consistent you do things, the more successful you will be. It's just basically like repeating it until it works out.
Yeah.
So I think this would be definitely like number 1 if I have to like pin down. Another one, a quote that I really liked was you as a human, you are enough for people to be interested in. Because I think this is sometimes we forget this a little bit, that your story really matters, right? Every single person has like this unique story that is your own. It's not, you cannot copy it. No one has experienced exactly the same, similar, but never exactly the same. But we tend to play it down and we always think, oh, it's not so important or I'm not so interesting that I can share it. But I think it's really important to remember that you are a very interesting person and that you can share your story and that people will actually be interested because they will resonate with you. And the ones that do, they are right now the creator economy, the influencers that basically do that, right? Like why are influencers big? Because they just found a ton of people that can resonate exactly what they are saying. They give an insight into their life. They, I don't know, they are creative or they are, I don't know, they have mental health issues or whatever they're a lot of times standing for like a purpose, or they live a life that I want to have. And that's why maybe I'm following them, right?
Yeah.
And that's basically why people have big followings, because those are the people that stepped over their shadow and said like, well, I'm going to share now what I've experienced.
Yeah.
I'm interesting enough for people to be interested in.
Yeah.
And I think that this is something that we forget a lot of times, that basically they also just started. And a lot of times creators, influencers, and those people, they are very introverted people. Once you get to know them, once you like talk to them, you figure out like, hey, this is not this guy. But once they put up the camera and say like, hey guys, you're like, whoa, like who's this person? So it's a lot of times also like playing a role in this whole like creator economy.
Yeah. Okay. I think that leads us already to the last question. And that is, what does the future hold for Marcus Engel?
That's also a very difficult one. But I think just continuing to reinvent the wheel. I think that's, focus, reinventing the wheel. I think that's what I want to do. Like tell many, many more stories. I think that's always very beautiful. Growing the podcast agency. Getting married as one point, of course.
It's a big one.
also a big one. And then of course, like staying healthy. I think that's the most important thing above all. I think that's also like a no-brainer, but still I think needs to be said. And hopefully just doing fun, cool things in life. I switched things around so many times, and I think that's also a little bit like I hate waiting. So that's also a little bit like a negative point, so I get bored quite quickly.
Okay, yeah.
But so far, like with the podcast business, it's so dynamic. You meet so many different people. I cannot really see how I get ever bored of this, because it's not really repetitive work, even though that the work itself, like the setup, the podcast, the asking questions. But every conversation takes such an interesting turn, right? As you said in the beginning, the first question, are you happy? Like this can define like how our whole conversation goes, right? If I would have said, well, I'm actually quite depressed,
would have been an entirely different conversation.
Been a different conversation, and then much more difficult conversation, because then you're like, oh, should we do the podcast? But I think that this is like the cool thing as well, that kind of that determines like how you go through life, and that determines like how your life is determined. And are you actively taking part in your life, or are you watching it from the second row? And I think that's the most important thing to remember, to always
summarizes this very nicely.
Yeah.
So with that, I want to thank you for sharing your story for a change.
Thanks
and,
for
thanks
for having me. It was a pleasure.